everybody, and welcome back to Depression Vacation Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things depressive and vacationing.
Yep, and podcasty.
Yeah,
I
and
guess,
podcasting.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need any other podcasts. We're the only one, so delete all your other friends' podcasts. Depression Vacation is the one. We are gaining some traction, you were saying last time, though. Like, we have 100 subscribers on our Facebook page now or something. And
And somehow only like 77 on Instagram.
You guys need to get your shit together on Instagram.
Don't know what the fuck's going on with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's pretty exciting. So welcome all new listeners. We're the same podcast. We don't have any new things really, so the more the same over here. So I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about, if that's okay. So
no, it's not okay for you to talk about things on your own podcast.
Well, I got excited about it because it's March. Mm-hmm. Hello, March. March is cool.
This is actually what I refer to as Smarch, which is a Simpsons reference because like the lousy Smarch weather. It means like the parts of March that are still winter but haven't actually turned into spring yet, so it's Smarch.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
so
sure.
We don't love the weather, but exciting month for women. It's Women's History Month. We didn't say anything about Black History Month last month, but we had Paul on. He talked a little bit about it.
Did he? There were so many other interesting things Paul talked about. I didn't even notice that. But yeah, I didn't know it was Women's History Month until I actually went to the open mic on Thursday, and Karen had I really like it when friends like make up jokes on the spot, because there was a comedian who went like early on who was not a good comedian, but he had casually mentioned it was also like Deaf History Month. And his joke, which I don't think he even realized was wrong, was like, oh yeah, now my kids gotta go read Braille or something. And he didn't know what Braille was, I think, and that's why it was funny. But then Karen came up with a joke to open her set. It's like, yeah, it's Deaf History Month and Women's History Month, so it's a month celebrating people who can't hear, and then a month celebrating people that no one listens to anyway.
I like that.
I loved it, and she came up with it literally like on the spot. So good job, Karen.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure I could have come up with that on the spot. So I love Karen. But anyway, so I work in banking, so it's kind of I did a presentation last year for my last bank that about like women and money, because it's really a hot button issue, right? You know, women making less than men, being economically less successful than men, and like most likely to be less successful than men. And of course, those statistics get scary when you talk about women of color and minorities. And so, I like to dive into history a little bit, and some of the things that I am going to share with my team next week. And that I kind of wanted to talk about today, if we're energetic enough to get into women and money. But it's some interesting statistics that I came across that you wouldn't necessarily think of, and like points in history. So, I mean, just to give you one really interesting fact is that it wasn't until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 where it then... Up until that point, women could be turned away from opening up a bank account if they didn't have a man with them.
Yeah, that was the Ruth Bader Ginsburg lawsuit, right? The one that they did on the basis of sex about. Right.
Yeah. So, that's crazy to think about. It's not that long ago. It's about 50 years ago. This year, this would be the 50th anniversary of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act.
Yeah,
Look at us go.
Don't tell that to the current Supreme Court, because they're going to try to reverse that.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. So
50 years of precedent doesn't mean anything anymore.
Right. So, I mean, that being said, like 50 years of women in finance, I think have been pretty, there's still a way to go, but there's been some pretty exciting things that women have done in finance. And one woman I want to talk about in particular is one of my favorite women in history that I don't think gets enough attention. Her name is Maggie Lena Walker.
I don't know who this is.
Yeah. Okay. So Maggie Lena Walker, she was the first woman to own a bank in the United States and the first woman of color
Oh.
to run a bank in the United States. And she opened up this bank, and the name escapes me right now because I'm doing this all from memory, so I'm sorry, guys. But you're doing yourself a disservice by not just jumping into the Wikipedia rabbit hole and just like learning everything you can, because she's an amazing person to read about.
Yeah, this is generally what I do with anything, so I'm definitely going to look this lady up when I get home.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so this was in 1908, I believe. She began this bank. So it's really interesting that, this was decades before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And there were a lot of other women who started only women banks that catered directly to women, that serviced only women. And I just feel like that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And so I thought these were really interesting women that I was reading about. Maggie was a fabulous businesswoman. She had a passion for like financial literacy. She was known for handing out piggy banks to kids and things. And so, you just think about kind of the impact that she had as a woman of color and in, being this badass bitch. And there was a book that was released recently that I have on my wish list, and I'm going to read it. It's called A Right Worthy Woman, and it's all about Magdalena Walker. So definitely check that out. And I think, there's some interesting statistics with like women-owned banks, women-run banks. Out of the top 50 banks in the country, one of them has a female CEO.
Wells Fargo?
Citi
Oh,
Bank.
interesting.
Yep.
See, I always think, I know that these people are, situations are fluid, but I always remember from, Too Big to Fail, the head of the Citigroup was an Indian gentleman, so that's just always, in my brain every time I think of Citigroup, even though that movie was 13 years ago.
Yeah. So, there are these, but when you look at also the statistics of women who are president of banks, because the CEO and the president of a bank is often a different person. So, for example, the bank I work for, they announced a female president effective January 1st. She's a woman of color. She's fabulous. I've met her. She's so super nice. And about 33% of bank presidents are women. So I think that's a pretty
getting up there a
right.
little bit.
I think that's a really impressive number, and I think it's interesting that we often think of finance as a man's game and a man's world. We think of like Wolf of Wall Street,
Yeah.
and I didn't know this. I'm reading this book. Let me start there. I'm reading this book. It's called Financial Feminist, and it's written by Tori Dunlap. Are you familiar with
Nope.
her? So she runs the Financial Feminist podcast, which is the #1 money podcast for women. And she wrote this book called Financial Feminist, and I'm about to start chapter 7. It's a really great read. And, as a banker, there are some things that I'm even challenged to think of a little bit differently in her writing, and I think she makes things a little bit less scary, especially investing. I know that even as a banker, when I think about investing, I get heart palpitations because
Yeah.
I'm there's this idea that investing is this complicated thing that only if you're really savvy you can do, and that's not 100% the case. If you educate yourself, you can pick up on what's going to, on the best ways to invest.
Yeah, my dad has made a pretty decent amount of money in investments and stocks over the years that I think, honestly, investing scares me quite a bit too, because we have a very different frame of mind for it. My dad kind of existed in a time frame where it was, you could throw a dart and hit money in the stock market because things just kept going up and up. But we're all coming of age in post 2008 where people lost everything in the stock market. So it's, especially as I'm very paycheck to paycheck and hand to mouth, it's a very scary idea of taking what little money I have and investing it. But also I'm kind of at the point too where I'm not in financial trouble necessarily or anything, but having, and you'll feel this when you have a mortgage too, I don't have nearly as much money and expendable income as I used to, and I'm thinking I might have to actually start just investing a little bit of money to try to make ends meet a little bit more. So
Right. And I'm really enjoying this book because it also speaks to the social issues that cause our financial issues, because there are these stigmas out there, or these misconceptions that if you're struggling financially, it's because you're a bad person. It's because you should know.
It's always a moral failing,
right? It's because people assume you should know what you're doing with money, even though we don't even teach it in schools.
No,
I mean we do. We teach you how to count it, but we don't teach you how. And we teach you. I mean, there are some budgeting classes, but when it really gets into the nitty gritty, talking about the things that are really going to help you be financially successful, and not even successful, but like maintain yourself financially, it's not enough. And especially when we look at the sexism and the racism and everything else that comes with, these issues.
Yeah, it's tough out there for, people of color and women, especially in the because you mentioned, like, the finance field has been like a very bro-dominated field for a long time. Like, all the guys I knew in, like, when I went to Hofstra, who went into finance, most of them were like total bros, like total like Long Island kind of douchey people, all sorts of like, that's the best way to describe them. And you know what, like, it's weird because like going into that field too, like, there was like one friend of mine who was pretty well adjusted. He was like the best friend of my friend Darren growing up, and he was definitely not a bro. And the last time I saw him, which was like 12 years ago, he said he was making like $300,000 a year working on Wall Street. But he said that was like basically his entire life. Like, coming out just to get a drink with us when I was in New York was a hassle for him because he had to leave work and then go back to work. So he was like, it takes a certain kind of brain to really want to be in that field. And unfortunately, that's the same kind of brain that will hoard as much wealth as possible. Like, it's sort of like they say about like the whole billionaire complex, is that like it takes a certain type of person to even become a billionaire, because most of us don't want to hoard wealth that much.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I think some of these statistics are shifting.
Yeah.
We're seeing, like I said, 33% of bank presidents are female. And when you look at just my bank, the percentage of female employees is 66%. We outnumber the men.
Good job.
Which is, I think that's incredible. And when I even look deeper and look at my own, like my colleagues, right? In my region, it's the majority of bank branch managers are women. There are 3 male branch managers in my region, which would be like Lebanon Burks.
Okay.
And I think that's really telling about like women are becoming more educated, and it's definitely not where it should, or where it's going to be. I'm not going to say should be, but it's not perfect. But I would say like the relationship between like women getting into finance is on the rise, and I think part of that is this identification of financial literacy being such a social and community issue.
Yeah.
This impacts our communities, and we're seeing as women, as active participants in our communities, that these are ways that we can impact. And this is like, I take what I do incredibly seriously, and I recognize that the decisions I make from day to day and the people that I talk to, like it drives the local economy, and it's like mind-blowing to think about. So, I always think about this time of year when we're getting into International Women's Month, and then on Friday we've got International Women's Day. And so I put together a little presentation to show my team and also my management team in the region too, because I think these are things that we don't talk about enough. And there are a lot of resources for women that want to learn more about finance. And you just have to Google it, and you just have to look for them. I've read 3 books. Well, I'm on my 3rd book that's specifically about finance for women. And the first one I read was called Think Like a Breadwinner. Which
you are a breadwinner. So.
I am. And that changed my life. Clever Girl Finance was a little bit more like nitty gritty. Like it was very kind of clinical, like explaining how things work and that kind of thing. And then Financial Feminist. And what I really enjoyed about Think Like a Breadwinner, and what I'm enjoying about Financial Feminist, is that it addresses first of all, these misconceptions, but, talking about it's totally normal to feel certain ways about money, to have these emotions, to have a psychological reaction to what happens to you in your financial life. And I feel like as a society, we tend to gloss over that.
Yeah. I kind of like when you were mentioning too, like it's a constant theme that people talk about that financial literacy is not taught in schools. And it kind of occurred to me, like while you were saying that, I'm like, I wonder if that's sort of a little bit on purpose. Like,
I'm sure it is.
Because like the less you understand about financial literacy, I guess the more likely you are to go into credit card debt, for instance, or whatever, and that drives the GDP up. So like maybe just not making people like making finance more of an abstraction probably gets people to consume more. So I mean, not a tenable situation, but I wonder if there is a little bit of of deliberate planning to that component. Conspiracy Hal going on.
Well, and if you read Tori Dunlap's book, she addresses that too, where she talks about even the way we market certain things is specifically geared to take advantage of women and their lack of knowledge when it comes to finance. For example, store credit cards. Store credit cards historically and still today have much higher interest rates up in the 20s versus if you get a credit card through your bank. And they are specifically the way that you're taught as an employee of these retail establishments to talk about these credit cards, they are incredibly underhanded. And they take advantage of people who don't know what they're doing, and they rely on these people to rack up balances on their credit cards and then get into debt and not pay them and only pay the minimum payment every single month, because that's the only way the credit card company makes money is if you pay interest. So one of the biggest ways like that Tori says to kind of get the better of the credit card company is to pay your bill each month, because then they're not making money off of you.
Yeah, that was me until very recently. Like, I want to say, like, until May of last year, I always paid off my full balance on my cards every single month. But just sort of the insidious nature of things is like, I had a series of car bills this year. One was like $1,100, and the other one, which really raked me over the coals, was like $1,250. And I'm not going to go back to that mechanic anymore because I'm pretty sure they ripped me off for that amount of money. But like, a lot of people don't casually have that kind of money sitting around. So like I'm in a little bit of credit card debt right now, and it's all related to those two particular car bills, which I'm paying down. I definitely pay a lot more than the minimum on my cards every month and have changed my spending. But it's really hard to pay off a credit card balance once you have one, and very much by design, I know. So
yeah, I've had customers that have been, I've seen it all in terms of credit card debt, and it's it's overwhelming. And they don't teach you how to get out of debt. That is one of the biggest, and I would say they don't teach you how to use credit responsibly, and they don't teach you how to get out of debt, because those, I think, are critical to being financially successful in the system as it is.
Yeah, so I have a coworker who actually has talked about this with me a bunch of times, and she's like she went through some hard times like a number of years ago, and she had like a lot of credit cards, and they were all maxed out basically because she was just like, she had some tragedies in her life and just wasn't like, wasn't caring a lot about those sort of things. And she had to go through a debt consolidation company to like get it all down, but it's apparently almost paid off at this point, which is good to hear, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you're stuck in those places. I'm not at that point, like, thankfully, but it's a tough balancing act out there. And the funny thing is your credit actually goes up the more debt that you're in, which is a bonkers like thing.
And it depends. I would say when we're looking at the credit score, it's frustrating because it's a flawed system.
Oh
but
my God,
you
yes.
have to play the game to do anything. So, and there are myths out there that are like, oh, if you carry a balance on your credit card all the time, then that's better for your credit. That's not true. And so it's also hard when there's also all of this misinformation out there on top of the problem itself.
Yeah, my credit utilization has like, it used to be like, I used to get top marks for 0 every single month, but you know, you were talking about like how it's very recent that women cannot be denied bank accounts. I saw someplace that the concept of a FICO score is actually only like from the late 80s. Is that true? Yeah.
Yes, that is true. And that actually was even after the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was established, what they found out was that men and women were still being unequally serviced in terms of credit, because they were basing things off of things like income, things like demographic or where they live, and all these other things. Like, so the FICO score was created as a way to say, like, this is a neutral number, a neutral metric that we can use to measure, whether or not you should receive credit. However,
it's so funny they thought that was going to be neutral.
It's not. That's the problem, is because, first of all, if you're looking at income, which is a basis for that we use to determine whether or not we will extend credit as a lender, women make less than men.
Yeah.
And so if I have two applications that are sitting next to each other and I have to decide to pick one that gets the credit, I'm going to choose the one that gets the higher income, and that's always usually going to be in the disfavor of the woman.
Yeah.
In the situation. And another piece of that is when it comes to things like debt, as I say, women are more likely to get into debt than men because, firstly, because of these store credit cards and these underhanded practices, in a lot of ways, they have taken advantage of, women are the ones that are out shopping. We are the top consumer in the United States. And as I say, too, women don't get the financial literacy that men get. And it starts at a very early age, too. And you'll notice that it's very prevalent, this idea where we assume men know what they're doing with money. We always assume men know what they're doing with money. We never assume. And women are stigmatized as frivolous.
Yeah.
We're stigmatized as like overspenders.
Or emotional
spenders.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating because, when you actually look at the numbers and then you look at the context behind those numbers, well, of course we're going to look that way because the system is engineered to make it that way.
Yeah. This is something that some people don't seem to understand about modern sexism and also racism, because it plays into the same sort of things there. Like, I've read a lot of articles about how FICO and credit scores impact people of color way more negatively because they sort of target things that historically a lot of black people just don't have. Like, in fact, they've only just recently, like, paying your bills can now go towards raising your credit score, right? Because it used to be that, like, paying your electric utilities and stuff like that was not an indicator of your credit score.
Correct.
And in reality, like, somebody once described a credit score to me as just like how responsible you are with paying your bills. And I think that is a great way in theory for what it should be. And if somebody is paying their bills on time, they're probably going to be able and have the money to pay. But there's a big gap between what white men make and what everyone else makes.
Right.
So.
And I think another interesting fact that I didn't know about before I read this book. So the bull on Wall Street, the charging bull. Apparently, it is a thing for tourists to rub his balls for good luck.
I did not know that.
That is true. And it's gotten to the point where the balls are entirely a different color from the rest of the statue because of the oil from everyone's fingers. I think that's hysterical. But something that Tori points out in her book, it's interesting that, we have this charging bull and it's such a masculine symbol. And then to touch his balls for good luck, like as a woman, you're just like, the symbolism there is a little too on the nose for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It's there's a reason I didn't go into finance, and mostly it was because I couldn't stand all of the people who were in finance. Like, even like I said, even the friends I had who were dear friends in college, because you're willing to put up with a lot more in your friend circle, I think, as you're younger. They were. It just did not seem like the field I wanted to go into whatsoever.
I think another issue that, this just popped into my head. Another issue that's not talked about enough is how money can be used as a form of abuse. Like we see, I've had customers in the past that have joint bank accounts, and I've seen partners come in and pull everything out and leave the other person with jack shit, and there's nothing that they can do about it because it's both of their money if they're both on the account. And it's really, sad to think that there are people out there who, I have had customers who had joint bank accounts that the other person had something like a gambling problem or a problem with alcohol, and they'd get their paycheck and then it would be gone within hours. And I think that's also something that people, should keep in mind too, in terms of how deep this goes. I guess like it doesn't only affect people on a societal level, on a structural level, but it comes within your house.
Yeah, it's all. It can be a scary world out there if you are not financially literate and you don't have access to your own money, because, what recourse do you really have if you have no money in the world to do anything? And the answer is, it kind of reminds me of what you were saying. Remember, ESPN did a really good 30 for 30 like 10 years ago called Broke. Did you ever hear about this one?
No.
So it's gotten a lot better in the years since they've made this documentary, but it used to be an epidemic of pro athletes would lose everything once they were done playing because they were very frivolous with their money, for starters. It's a moral failing being frivolous with your money, but also they just had so many vultures and they were so financially illiterate that they just would lose everything. And Leon Searcy was talking in the documentary about he had a joint bank account with his wife at the time. And they had gotten into an argument before going on a vacation. Then they went on the vacation and everything was okay. And when he got back, he found out that $2.5 million had been withdrawn from his bank account. And he said that she told him that she thought that they were going to get divorced and she just wanted to get as much money as possible from him before they left. And it's really it's fascinating because some of the interest loans that these athletes are able, part of the reason is they get into those you think 20% on a credit card is bad. One of the most ridiculous stories I heard was Vince Young, who was a former national champion, 3rd overall pick, played for the Titans and a bunch of other teams, had a decent amount of money. And during the NFL lockout, he took out a $1 million loan from some place that had a max interest rate of it wasn't 100% interest because I don't think that's legal, but it was he had to essentially pay back double the loan within a certain time frame. I'd have to look up what the specifics of it were, but it was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, he defaulted on that loan because that's what it was there for. But some of the things that they were
yeah,
you gotta be careful with your money, guys. Whether or not you were making millions of dollars or you're pulling in $30,000 a year, and it's hard in today's world too, especially when housing costs have gone up so much.
Right. Well, another piece of that too is you had mentioned about the interest rate, and it wasn't too long ago that it was completely legal to have interest rates on things like payday loans up to 400%.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it was within the last, I want to say 10 to 15 years, not maybe even more recently than that it was not, they're not, now you're not allowed to do that, but you could that recently as 15 years ago.
I haven't seen ads for these in a while, but and I was in California when I saw the bulk of these ads, so I don't know if they were out here too. But did they have ads over here for indigenously run payday loans or things like that?
No.
This was something I used to...
Not that I know of.
It was called Big Sky Mutual or something like that. And I haven't seen these ads in years because I think this is illegal now. But basically, it operated on the same logic as native casinos operate, where even though there are maximum interest rates you can charge here, technically if they were running a payday loan on their reservation, they can do whatever they want. I think that's how it worked. And the fine print for some of these payday loans that I was looking at, while the ad was on, was something in the realm of 280 to 300% interest on the loans. And I'm well, that's absolutely bonkers. There's no way you're going to ever pay off that loan. That's default waiting to happen.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, going back to when I was saying that
Back to my original point.
Right. Well, I mean, I just really want to like dial in on this idea of like credit in itself is not a bad thing in the sense that like I said, if it's used responsibly, you can be very successful. But there's just this idea, and I've seen this with my mom, where she sees credit as like an extension of income, and that is not right. So she's like, oh, now I have this money that I can spend on XYZ, like thousands of dollars, and at the end of the day, you're going to need to pay that back. And I don't know how she doesn't connect that, like those two things together. And it's really scary. And I really feel for a lot of people who, you know, make these decisions and then they come to my office and they're asking me for they're like, I need money. What can I do? And there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you default and then, you know, you have $5 in your bank account, I can't get you a loan if you have 3 other loans that you are still paying off, or 6 credit cards that are maxed to the limit.
Yeah. You're leveraged out the door, basically.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like corporations and the people in the top percents, they use credit to their advantage, and they, you know,
this is how Elon Musk doesn't pay taxes.
Right. Yeah. And so it's really a big fuck you to the rest of us that, you know, the system is the way that it is. And the best thing that you can do is be like, knowledge is power. I say this all the time. It's really knowing how to utilize credit to your benefit, in the sense that like I was reading about in Tori Dunlap's book about they talk about like socially responsible investing and that kind of thing. And we talked on the podcast before about, you know, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Yeah. And there's a section in the book that is very much talks about exactly my mindset, in the sense that like do the least bad you can possibly do. Yeah. Like if you have to decide between investing in a oil company and investing in something like solar energy, even though the one for solar energy might not be as profitable as the oil one, you know, you have to make a moral decision there and decide what your values are. But
that might get weirder too, because so something that popped up in the news this week that I don't know if you saw this. ExxonMobil is actually suing a number of its investors for what they refer to as activism investment, because basically they have a sizable number of their shareholders who the agenda for every shareholders meeting, they put on things trying to get ExxonMobil to do more renewable sources. And they're suing these stockholders for doing this repeatedly. And I didn't even know that was a thing you could do.
Yeah, like, that's wild. I'm going to have to look at that.
Yeah, that was on, and it was from NPR, so it's not like paydaynews.com or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was kind of shocked to read that. It was like, I did not think that you could do something like this.
Yeah, I want to sue these people that want to help the environment. That's crazy.
Not just these people, but these people who invest in my company and own a piece of my company, and you know are legally allowed a say at a shareholders meeting of what they want the company to do, even if they don't have the actual power to do so. I didn't like the idea of activism investment, which feels like something that Fox News coined, is something that they're like rallying about a lot now, because like what you're really saying is people have changed their minds about things, and I'm mad. But it's one of those things too where I can't help but think that like just because the current Supreme Court is completely compromised, that like they're trying all of these like weird new things to see how much they can get away with, how much will stick, and how much bad we can essentially do in certain places. Yeah, so who knows? Like, if that's true, are you not allowed to socially consciously invest your money in things? Like,
yeah, I don't think that's the case. Because when we're thinking about, you know, something like Fidelity, or even ones where you can choose your own investments, like Robinhood, Acorns, that kind of thing. So the short answer as an individual is no. They can't like tell you who to invest in those companies. Now then you also have to take into account some of the larger investment companies that may have their own, like if you have a financial advisor, they may not have, best interests in mind in terms of social values. And what they're looking for is to give you the best rate of return on your investment. So they're not going to be picking and choosing like, oh, they're not going to want to invest in an oil company.
Sure.
So it's kind of like an unwritten kind of like, you kind of have to pick your battles on that one. But
so let me, just so we get this on the record straight, I hate reading people who read news stories over podcasts, but
yeah.
ExxonMobil is suing investors who want faster climate action. ExxonMobil faces dozens of lawsuits from states and localities alleging the company lied for decades about its role in climate change, but now ExxonMobil is going on the offensive with a lawsuit targeting investors who want the company to slash pollution that's raising global temperatures. Investors in publicly traded companies like ExxonMobil try to shape corporate policies by filling shareholder proposals that are voted at biannual meetings. ExxonMobil says it's fed up with a pair of investor groups that are claiming it's abusing the system by filing similar proposals year after year in order to micromanage its business. So, yeah, again, I didn't know that was a thing you could do. Sue your own investors for what they're allowed to do.
Way to suck, Exxon.
Yeah. Something else I did want to circle back to, too, that you were talking about, like with going back to debt. I did have my roommate who I moved out to California with. He kind of fell into a little bit of that trap you were talking about. Like and this was in his early 20s, like maxed out credit cards. He got out of a really bad relationship where they were living together too. And certain aspects of that, like she maxed his credit cards, and also they had a car together that she totally like left him on the hook for and things like that. And he actually had to go to bankruptcy court over that, which he said was the best decision he ever made because there was no way he was ever going to get out of that pile of debt for all that stuff. He was like 22, I want to say, or 23 when we moved to California. And it was rough sledding for a while. Like we had to have our parents co-sign our lease agreement, for instance, when we moved to California. But he rebuilt his life perfectly fine. He was very financially like the experience for that, like he budgeted out everything and became very financially literate and responsible. And again, he said bankruptcy court, like we had other friends in California who lived like way beyond their means and were like maxing out credit cards to the tunes of like tens of thousands of debt. And he was trying to convince a lot of them to go through bankruptcy court too, because he said it's like, it kind of, if you've learned your lesson, it gets you out of a jam. How do you feel about bankruptcy as a tool to do that?
Overall, bankruptcy, if you can avoid it, is always going to be my first like piece of advice. And what I'm going to say is before you decide, if you're going to file for bankruptcy, you should definitely talk to your banker first. Like go to your bank. Asked to speak to, like they're usually called like relationship bankers or universal bankers, or even like for me, I have these conversations frequently. And sometimes, even though it feels like you're drowning and there's nothing to be done, so a lot of the time just reimagining how you're budgeting and kind of approaching debt with a couple of different methods first is what I'm always going to recommend as a banker. Because bankruptcy fucks you over in terms of credit for 7 years. It's on your financial consumer report for that long. And so I can see as like a 22-year-old, 7 years, he comes to 29. It's a pretty good bounce back age to be at, right? Like you have time to rebuild and that's going to drop off when you're at this age that like, okay, you have plenty of time ahead of you to,
rebuild
and to start over. The older you get, the more strongly I'm going to fight you against bankruptcy.
Like in Michael Scott's case, for instance, where he's like 47, I declare bankruptcy.
Right. So, at 47, right, then you're looking at that's not dropping off until you're 54. And between the ages of 47 and 54, you're probably going to need some sort of credit at that point. And most banks or most reputable lenders are not going to extend credit if there's bankruptcy on your credit report.
And by reputable, you mean people who will charge exorbitant interest rates on the money. Like, Yeah, that would be tough. Do they also like seize assets in the case of a bankruptcy too?
I don't know the answer to that, to
Okay.
be honest. But always before, getting to the point of bankruptcy, talk to a banker, talk to an attorney, and talk to like who does your taxes and things like that. Just to
Oh, I have to do my taxes. Thanks for reminding me.
You're welcome. Do your fucking taxes, people.
Well, I especially have to do my taxes too, like working for the Department of Revenue. Because did I ever tell you about, like, I got suspended my first year working at the
Really?
lottery because I didn't file a state, like, again, I was not a very financially literate person like most people, and I didn't file a state tax return because I have never once in my entire life, not only have I not owed money on my state tax returns, but the amount of money that the state has owed me has never been anything more than like $1. And so I just never bothered like turning in a state tax return ever because I was like, well, what's the point? Well, when you work for the Department of Revenue, the point is that all of their employees have to be completely in compliance. And it was a really serious thing. Like I got several interviews by HR. Thankfully, the way that worked out was because we work irregular like weeks and such, and my suspension was for a week. It ended up being a week that I was only going to work 3 days anyway, so I didn't lose a ton more money. Just because, again, suspensions were worded as an exact week. And that week, they didn't fix this or anything so that I would work less days. It just happened to work out that way. But yeah, that was a lesson learned for me. Like, file a state tax return every year.
Yeah.
Even though you are owed 5 cents on every.
Yeah. And I would say, too, even working in banking, there are some, you have to pass a federal background check.
I didn't know that for bank. Well, that makes sense.
You have to get fingerprinted and all that stuff. And another thing is, like, they are going to check your consumer report. And it's not usually at like a hard credit inquiry, but they are going to look because they don't want someone working for the bank who's desperate for money. That is a recipe for disaster.
That's actually, they didn't do a credit check by the time I started working for the lottery, but they did, like, for some more reasons, they did the most intense background check I have ever seen for anything, because they don't want somebody who's working in gambling to be hard up for money and be a compromised person. It's same with horse racing too. Weirdly, like had to go through a background check for when I was licensed by the Horse Racing Association for just doing camera work, and it was a completely different process. Like what was it? I owed $150 in back taxes that I had to pay to get my license somewhere. I was like 21 or 22 when this happened. But also they fingerprinted me and like put me in the system. The lottery did not fingerprint me or put me in the system, but just like for whatever reason, I've worked in gambling a lot in my career. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely am fortunate to be in the industry that I'm in because I have access to so much knowledge and resources. And before I got into banking, I fell into the new college kid trap of maxing out credit cards and things like that, even though in my head I'm thinking like I'm never going to get into debt and I'm going to be a good person and I'm not going to do it. And I still fucked it up. And it ended up that I only had like 2 credit cards and they both got maxed out and one got sent to collections.
Oh no.
And then because of my ADHD, we have this fun thing where we get paralysis where there's a big problem like that and we don't want to address it.
Yeah.
So it just became worse. And my credit was really shitty for a really long time. And then after I got into banking, I started doing some research on how to get rid of debt and that kind of thing. I reached out to the collections agency that had that account and just called them up and asked them what is the lowest possible amount I can pay to get this resolved and off my credit report. And it was like, because the full amount was something like $3,000. And I paid $800 to get it taken off.
I've heard that they do settle things like this for a lot less money, like because if it goes to collections, a lot of that is kind of like
cents on the dollar. Yeah.
So it's the same thing with like medical debt. Apparently, like you can, because I remember John Oliver, like it was like $50,000 or something like that. He bought $15 million in medical debt one year and forgave it on the program. So it's kind of like nuts when you get to that point. But like,
Yeah.
as you were saying, this is a good example of just like talking with your creditors or talking with your banker to figure out a solution, because like they don't want to lose everything too. So
Right. And ultimately, even as a banker, and that's something that I'm shouting from the rooftops, I'm like trying to get as many people educated about it as possible. Because bankers have such a stigma, and there are people who don't want to tell me their personal things because or about their finances, because it's something that we're trained not to want to talk about. And I can't tell you how many people have like looked at me and been like, "Why are you asking me that? You don't need to know that." And I just want people to know that like 9 times out of 10, a banker is asking you these questions for your financial benefit.
yeah.
The best way to protect yourself is to, if you're a banker, like, now I don't want you to be assuming you're talking to your banker on the phone, but like if you're sitting at your banker's desk and they ask you questions about like, oh, I don't know, your income or where you have accounts elsewhere and things like that. We're not trying to be nosy. We want to help you decide on solutions that's going to be best for you.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that, rather than being all sneaky about it, and I do this, and I talk to them about this too, in terms of like accounts, credit cards, loans, like all of these things. Everybody asks me, what's the catch? I'm like, think about this for a minute. If I scare you, or if I withhold information from you and you sign up for a product or a service, right? And you hate it, and you find out that I withheld something, like there's a hidden fee you didn't know about, or something, what's going to happen come that thing closing? You pay it off, or you close the account, or whatever. You're going to switch banks. I don't want you to switch banks. So why would I keep something from you?
Yeah. It's one of those that like I had a comparison in my head that just totally fluttered out. So
well, that just grinds my gears. It's sure. And then what part of my job too is I have to reach out to business customers, because I'm a small business banker. And so I'll reach out and I'll say, hey, I just want to talk, get to know a little bit about your business and what you're looking forward to in 2024, how I can be of help. And they're like, well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to talk to me? And I'm like, because like,
this is how it's supposed to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to help you, like, just manage your money.
A comedian that I've been watching a lot more. Do you know who Gary Goldman is?
No.
He's a hilarious comedian. In fact, he's going to be in New York on April 12th, and I'm going to try to go to see him. But he was doing a bit about Shark Tank on his last special, and he was talking about like the actual terms that the sharks have offered businesses. And he's like, do not take a deal from the sharks on Shark Tank. Do you know who will give you that much money for incredibly more favorable terms and not be in your business all the time? A bank.
Yeah, actually. And I've only seen like Shark Tank a couple of times.
Yeah, same here.
But I mean, we as bankers, like for me as a small business banker, I've definitely learned a lot about a number of different industries. And so it's kind of funny whenever I have somebody come into the office and they are in something like mechanics or construction. I had someone come in who has a tree care business, and I asked him about his business, and I said, how is it? How is business and everything like that? And he said, oh, well, I wish I had more clients. And I was like, well, let's think about this. Like, are you taking just the clients that reach out to you, the ones that you can schedule? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, why don't you do service contracts? Why don't you have clients sign up for a 3-year contract, and you regularly provide them with services, and they pay you a fixed amount? And he was like, oh my God. And so like, that's the thing is like, I really just want everyone to like, if you don't trust your bank, find a bank you trust, and just like find a banker that you want to work with. Because genuinely, like, there are things that we have access to. You have no idea how much information I can access about like how other successful businesses in your industry are being successful. And like, we learn so much, and just come talk to us.
Yeah. We all want to, a rising tide lifts all ships, I guess, in that situation.
Yeah. Like, when you succeed, we succeed. I mean, the only way that I can like get my bonuses and stuff is if you're doing well.
Yeah. Same with like that was how it was with my mortgage broker. Like I really did feel like I was put through the ringer quite a bit with the mortgage stuff. And even he sort of joked about that. He was like, yeah, pre-2008, I could have just signed you up immediately. But now I have to do all these things. I have to run a credit. They were sometimes not giving any credit checks to people or checking if they even had jobs, and they would give them a mortgage pre-2008. Like, man, what a time to be alive that would have been. Right?
Yeah. No, and it's crazy. And one of the things that really pisses me off about people is when they aren't like aware of changes and things like that, or they like get mad about change because it's the one thing you can count on.
Yeah.
And I'll get customers that'll come in and be like, I've been doing this for the last 10 years and it's never been a problem before. And I'm like, well, weirdly enough, rules change. Crazy. I know. Insane.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, we're one of the most regulated industries in the country. Like, you're just going to have to fucking deal.
Yeah.
So.
And it is for more benefit because, it was pretty, not that I really was much of an adult when that happened, but I've heard it was pretty bad in 2008 when all that shit went down.
There are some bankers that I work with that were in banking when all of that happened. And so, like, I love hearing their stories and, like, how that impacted them as, like, professionals. And, like, I mean, they've seen things that I can't even, like, conceptualize, like 8% or even like 13% mortgages. Like that's not been a thing in my lifetime.
Yeah, even like 7 or 8% mortgages are kind of like.
Well, it's that high now.
I know.
But
speaking I'm speaking definitely from a position of privilege and cluelessness here, since my mortgage rate is 3.6%. Because how waited till the last possible second for good mortgage rates, but finally did get one. Like, it's an interesting thing though, because like usually like the thing that you're eyeing when you get your first mortgage is that you're going to refinance a little bit further down the line, but like
you probably won't have to.
No, in fact, it might even be because my parents are always talking about how they want me to take over their house, and that's in kind of like I was always kind of like, yeah, that might be a nice thing. Like my aunt took over my dad's parents' house and kept it beautiful, but put her own touch on it. But also, I've been thinking, I'm like, if I have to sell my current house and get another mortgage, hopefully the interest rate is at least somewhat comparable to what I have here, which it probably won't be. But they kind of they rise and fall. Like,
yeah.
So we will see about that. But my hat's off to you looking for a house right now because
it's a struggle.
Oh, it's the house I was talking to you about like just a week or two ago. That's like right down the road from me. It's sold, and it's sold so quickly.
Yep.
I can't even I was curious just looking online about how much it sold for, and it's not even listed. Like that's how fast it sold. It was just Zillow didn't even get a hold of it. It just says, oh, sold for $199,000 in 2017. I'm like, okay, this is no help.
Yeah.
There's another house for sale in my neighborhood though that this absolutely like dropped my jaw. It's like on the north side of my neighborhood, so it's a much bigger like house, but it's not like super bigger than my house, and it's definitely a smaller property than mine, and it's selling for $600,000.
I believe it.
5 bathroom, 5 bedroom, which who needs 5 bathrooms? Seriously.
Not me.
But yeah.
Maybe, you could have one for all of the weekdays. My Monday bathroom, my Tuesday bathroom.
My neighbor Jack, who lives in like the giant mansion that's like up the street from... You've never been part of... I've shot a lot of VidJam movies in his house, and I don't think you've ever been a part of one of those shoots. But he when I was talking to him about this, he pointed out, it's like, I have 6 bathrooms in my house. And I had to go through my head. I'm like, oh, yeah, you do have 6 bathrooms. Like, what the actual fuck?
It's like, oh, I can't use this bathroom. I have a Wednesday shit to make.
The funny thing is, like, there's one in the basement, one on the first floor, and then 4 upstairs. I was like... Yeah, everybody.
Is there like one per bedroom? Like, do they all have their own private bathroom? Or
and they not only have their all private bathrooms, but then there's a shared bathroom between the master bedroom and the guest bedroom.
Wow.
And they also have like it's au pair's quarters because they had a live-in nanny, and so it's almost like a little apartment,
it's like a kitchenette. And stuff.
Well,
nice.
no kitchenette, but it was like sort of an annex from the rest of the house ish.
Neato.
But it is that is a beautiful house too, which. I think he also kind of wants his kids to take over his house, which is never going to happen because they're just not that interested. But you know, it's such a weird time to be buying a house in general. So I know you and Ryan will get through it eventually. But
yeah, we just got to wait it out. I mean, we're in a good spot because we're not in a rush and we're not trying to sell a house. We're still renting. So
yeah,
it's pretty good.
The like, I was so lucky that I just thought about like asking my parents if they knew anybody who was selling a house too in the neighborhood, because that was how I got mine, was like getting to it before it went on the market, because it would have been a mess then.
Yeah.
So.
I know we've had some friends and family reach out and be like, oh, look at this house. And it's definitely something we appreciate. But I struggle with like saying no.
Yeah,
and so like
same.
I've had to text people back and be like, oh, it's kind of outside of our budget, or like it's not really in the area we're looking for, because I don't want to say nothing and ignore them. But I'm also like, but I really appreciate you thinking about us. Like I'm happy that you are coming to me with this recommendation. It's because you care.
Yeah. But stop sending me houses.
No, you don't have to stop sending me houses. Just be ready for me to have to drink a glass of wine and then tell you why I can't buy the house.
Yeah, it'll be a good investment though, because like humble brag, this is something I check all the time, is what my house's value is.
Yeah.
And my house's value has gone up what is it, like $50,000 in just 2 years.
That's nice.
It is like, it's kind of crazy to me, because that's not normal, right? That your house isn't supposed to gain that much value that quickly.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what that will do in the future. I'm not an economist, so I'm not as strong in deciding how that's going to impact the overall economy or interest rates or even valuations of houses in the future. And I asked my real estate agent about that, and she said the way that she made it sound like makes it sound like it's not going to have a huge impact on like houses losing value.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't fully understand it, because the way I see it is like house prices right now. Like we've got people that are spending, tens of thousands of dollars above what these houses are actually valued at. And then, down the line, I'm wondering if like, well, how is that going to affect the value of the home 5 years from now?
So the guy who sold me my house was a bit of a house flipper. Like his family did live in my house, but they were just moving to a different, like they kind of bounced between different properties that they owned. And I sort of made a joke to him. I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of my friends say they're just waiting for the next housing crash so they can actually afford a house. Ha 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 ha. He didn't think that was funny, but he did tell me, and he made a good point. He's like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. And here's why. He was saying it's more, which this is true, like scarcity of homes is pushing the value of homes up. And he said the problem in 2008 was that they just overproduced these homes that had like such high valuations. And then like Alan Greenspan very famously, hopefully joked, but I don't know if this was a joke, to Bernanke, saying that in order to solve their housing crisis, they needed to just start burning homes to create more scarcity. You know?
I mean, definitely our biggest struggle right now is inventory. The areas that we want to live, there's nothing available, and things that do show up are either way out of our budget or quality-wise are not where we want to live.
Yeah, I was really lucky I didn't get because there was another house I looked at like a year before I got my house, like kind of over by like off of Derry Street. It sold for like $150, and it was a pretty nice property, but it was definitely a bit of a fixer-upper. Yeah. And I think my personality, like I have enough trouble just maintaining my house, so I don't think a fixer-upper would have been right for my personality.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan and I, we definitely don't want a fixer-upper. Like, I'll paint a wall. I don't give a shit about that, but I'm not like redoing a foundation or replacing a roof. I'm not doing any of that.
Well, yeah, the roof is the big thing. Like that was... luckily the roof was just replaced on my house like in the last 15 years. So
nice.
So here's another issue with my parents' house too, is that my parents almost had to replace the roof on their house because my dad tried to change insurance companies without telling my mom. Speaking of doing things without telling your spouse. And the inspector came around, took pictures, and said they wouldn't insure them unless they replaced the roof on the house. So, and thankfully they were able to keep their old insurance because they didn't sign up for anything else. But like that could have bitten them in the ass very badly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's tough maintaining your house, but it's a very worthwhile, nice thing. Although mine is very junky and needs a lot of work right now.
You'll get there.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks for talking to us so much about like financial literacy and stuff. Like, since this is your job, it is your passion, and it is your calling in life. So.
Yeah. And, I'm like... like I said, I believe that knowledge is power. And so like I have people message me from time to time that actually I heard from somebody recently who actually thought that I worked for one of my old banks, and he was like, oh, I'm coming to see you later. I'm like, in Cleona? And he was like, do you not work for this bank anymore? And I was like, no, dude.
Was this the one that fired you too? Or
yeah, it was the one that fired me.
Tell him to get out of that bank.
Well, and so I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I haven't, and it was kind of funny because I was like, I haven't worked there since like 2022. So, but you know, like, and people ask me about finance a lot, and I don't mind it. It, like I said, and like you said, like it is definitely my passion, and I think I will educate as many people as I possibly can because I think it's that important.
I've been yawning a lot during this, and it's not because it's not incredibly compelling. All this is very interesting. Hal just stayed up later last night than he should have. But
that's all right.
Getting old sucks.
I forgive you.
Yeah, you have anything coming up interesting, doing stuff?
Not actually, I might be. I am probably. I think it is a 75% chance at this point.
This is pretty non-committal sounding.
Yeah, I know. I've been asked to put together a one-off comedy show to benefit the Duncannon Cove Mountain Community Theater.
Oh, isn't that nice? That's the place that did Addams Family, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they want to do a comedy night in April. So I'm going to be pulling that together.
Woo.
So, yeah, that'll be fun. Other than that, Ryan's got Hello Dolly this weekend.
Yeah.
And so by the time you all listen to this, he'll be all done with Hello Dolly. But
it only runs for one weekend?
Yeah, because it's high school production.
Oh, yeah, he mentioned that because we were going to do like an offbeats practice / big picture planning thing. And he was like, yeah, that's going to be tough for me next week.
Yeah.
But then it turns out the hit isn't doing normal shows at all this month anyway. They're doing like a 10th anniversary jamboree.
Cool.
Which is kind of cool. I mean, it gives me sort of, I think the Offbeats are going to perform the last Saturday of the month because Vanessa is hosting one of the jamborees. But, you know, it's nice to have just some time off. Like, I think I mentioned before, I was considering just taking a month off from everything to try to get my, like, health and everything in order, which seems to be going pretty well so far. So it's not the worst idea just having some time off.
That's nice, yeah.
But yeah, something I am thinking of putting together, which, you know, I'm putting it out here in the universe to sort of shame myself into actually taking the initiative to do it. But I was talking to you about, I kind of want to try to do a sketch showcase for the Fringe Festival this year. And I have a couple of ideas for sketches that have just like run through my brain. And I've just been watching I Think You Should Leave on repeat so long that like, I was like, I think I can figure out like with a little bit of just looking up what the structure of a sketch is, like how to actually do it. And I think you and I are going to write some of these together and hopefully pull in some of the really talented people that we've seen around Harrisburg, because I think that like sketch form seems more interesting to me because you don't have to, it can just be one joke you're telling rather than having to do like a whole short film. So, and I've even come up with a name and it's related to the podcast. I was thinking about calling it Well-Adjusted People, a sketch showcase.
Fuck yeah. I love it.
Because in every one of these sketches, the person is not well-adjusted. Well, that was dumb, Hal. You just explained what the dumb joke is.
It's fine. It's fine. It's still going to be fun.
No, I've lost all my confidence. I'm not funny. I can't do this.
No, we're doing it. I'm making you do it.
Yeah, we're going to do, I want to try other things too, because like I've said before, like I did stand up again on Thursday, and it went pretty well for one of my sets, because I'm firmly, I hope, at least middle of the pack, but I'm probably low middle of the pack. And like, I don't feel like stand-up is the best, like, I just don't get it well enough to do it. I'm kind of just sort of looking for still the thing that I can express my funniness in a way that I'm actually good at. And I feel like sketches might work, because that's like an intersection of just filmmaking and comedy writing at the same time. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Well-Adjusted People. Hopefully it'll be finished and done for Fringe Festival, which is going to be in July this year.
All right.
Yeah,
awesome.
we'll have to have several people on for Fringe as well.
But,
But yeah, this has been fun. Thanks, Shannon, for sharing all of your information on all of the, you know, cool financial stuff that you do. And yeah, if I've taken away anything from this, like, talk to your banker.
Yeah, definitely do.
They're there to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're like generally really friendly. And if they're not friendly to you, tell them that I told them they were bad at being a banker.
If you're not friendly to me, I'm going to take my $250 to some other bank, and we'll see how you do then.
Yeah, actually. Why not? Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you next week. Smarch.